Welcome to the Screen the Screener College Basketball Podcast with your hosts, Mike Randall and Gus Kearns.
Welcome in, listeners, to the Screen the Screener College Basketball Podcast, where we're always talking everything college hoops. You could have been anywhere else on the dial, but you chose to be here with us, Mike and Gus. We totally appreciate that. And today, we're going to continue our team preview series, and we've brought in Evan Dudley to talk some UAB basketball, some UAB hoops. Evan, thank you so much for joining us. How's everything going on your end?
It's going well.
You can follow Evan at Dudley Do Right AL on Twitter, and please follow him over at aldotcom to find anything on the Blazers that is hoop related. All right, Evan, let's start with a recap of last year. Things started anew with Andy Kennedy on the bench, and they found immediate improvements, especially on the defensive end. Allow the listeners to learn about last year's successes and maybe highlight one of those successes or two along the way.
Well, last year is going to be a lot like this year as far as, kind of what Andy did with recruiting. He was hired right at the beginning of the pandemic, as soon as, basically within a couple of days of all the tournaments being canceled in 2020. So he takes over. And I mean, it's almost a complete turnaround on the roster. A lot of guys leave for the transfer portal, but he brings a lot in. Notably, you got Mike Ertl from Louisiana Monroe. He was a big three-point shooter, and at La Monroe set some records there. But he was more of an inside shooter, more of a mid-range guy. A mid-range mock, if you will, last year for the Blazers. But he kind of started opening up near the end of the season. You had Juan Jackson, who, is just an incredible defensive player, and he's getting better on offense. But, I mean, just his tenacity on the court alone is just, it raises the level of play of everyone around him. And, he's definitely an NBA, top player, I think, just with his ability to, be aggressive and intense on both sides of the floor. Reminds me a little bit of the Worm. One of my favorite players. He's got, I think he's going to have an even better year this year. He had a little bit of injuries last year, so he had to kind of come back slowly off of that. Then you had Tre Jemison comes in from Clemson, a Birmingham native. So, I mean, he kind of knew the lay of the land, and, he was a really big guy. Had a couple of times where, maybe he got kind of stood up a little bit, most notably Junior Lofton out of La Tech. And, of course, Junior Lofton did that to a lot of people last year. I expect big things from him. He's a early candidate for Conference USA Player of the Year, just with what he did last year. But, and that'll be a big battle this season, just, the La Tech and UAB game with those two kind of going at it. So those are three guys that came in last year and really made a difference. But you also had, Taven Lovin, who's back this year, one of the main guys back, a really strong driver in the lane, can really get it done. I think a stat came out the other day. I think he was only a handful of players that scored more than 40 points or so, driving lanes or something like that, something similar to like that. So he's a really great creator for them. And, as he continues to progress and goes into this year, he's going to be counted on a whole lot more, and he's really going to have to get the job done, besides just kind of, maybe not so much sharing with his teammates, but, when it's time for him to take over, he's going to have to take over and not be so hesitant to that.
Yeah, when you have a shot creator like that, you need to have him get into the lane, get that paint touch, and then kick it to one of those shooters, or maybe a pocket pass to, like you said, like Tre Jemison, the big that's going to be lurking inside. Juan Jackson, you mentioned, he reminds me a little bit of like you mentioned the Worm, but I'm going to say maybe a little John Carter from West Virginia, who's now in the NBA. He's that tenacious on defense and makes that much of a difference on that side of the floor, which is rare for a perimeter player, especially inside your conference. And speaking of inside your conference, Evan, what were some of the challenges for the Blazers and for Conference USA with COVID last year? What were some of the unique challenges and maybe one of the hurdles that the conference and your squad in particular had to overcome?
UAB in particular, they didn't have too many problems. I think maybe 3 to 4 games were canceled last year with COVID protocols. I think they had one player that was in a COVID protocol earlier in the year, and he was able to get back on the roster. It was just him coming in late, so they had to get him through all that, go through quarantine. But I think the biggest challenge was probably just the way they scheduled last year within conference. It was a Friday, Saturday back to back, in the same town, so you're playing the same team back-to-back days in their arena. So that was kind of a challenge. This year we're going to be back to kind of normal their Thursday, Saturday schedule. So it'll be, a lot back to normal. But that was probably the biggest challenge in and of itself, was just having to, play that conference schedule. And, you basically get an entire week off instead of kind of you can get stay a little bit more consistent when you got a few more games in between, instead of just having back-to-back in once a week.
And those back-to-backs, that second game is always interesting, especially on the same floor in the same atmosphere, because now you know exactly what's going to happen. You know what sets are going to run. So it's almost like who can turn it around quickest and make the adjustments the quickest. It's almost like halftime adjustments, but like 48-hour adjustments. You mentioned some of the transfers. UAB is not shy about traveling inside that transfer portal. Let some of the listeners know who are some of the newer Blazers this season who fit the culture of the program, and they're going to help Coach Kennedy get some wins, even more wins this year for him and his staff.
Well, after last year, I thought Andy was he was pretty good when it came to the transfer portal. And then this year, it looked like he, almost created it. He can traverse it. He can go in and out. He's like Doctor Strange in the multiverse. He can just open portals like that and get in and out. But this year, he's got, I think it was 5 or 6 guys that are, big time players that, that have started, starting experience, who have played well in their former teams. You start out with Tyreek LaCure from South Alabama, Justin Brown from South Florida. Then you got, kind of the headliners, KJ Buffin from Ole Miss, Jamal Johnson from Auburn. And then you got some other guys coming in from junior college, Odessa Junior College, Ade Diadu and Elijah Tate. Those are guys that are going to kind of progress through the system, I think, over the next year or so, and they'll be kind of counted on. But those are 2 big junior college guys that can get along with all these, big-time transfers they got from some Power 5 squads.
Yeah, Buffin seems like that typical, prototypical wing that can do a couple of things, defend a couple of positions, do a couple of different things offensively as well. And I think his size is going to make a big difference right next to, the size that you already have there, you say with Tre Jemison. And one of the things you mentioned is those returners. You have 4 starters returner. What is the difference? Who's the difference maker? Who's going to be that big shot maker and taker and lead the veteran squad in the final minutes of a tight game? And we know that UAB values possessions due to their defensive prowess. So they're going to play a bunch of, 1 possession games in the final 2 minutes. Who's going to handle the ball? Who's going to be the shot taker? And talk about those 4 starters.
As we've, mentioned earlier, Taven Loban's going to be kind of that guy that's going to be counted on to kind of make that shot, especially if it's coming on the inside. If you're going to go to the outside, they're going to have to kind of find these new shooters. That's where you're going to get a lot of these new guys are going to be more more outside shooters, because what you got coming back, you got Taven Loban, a more inside driver, although he can, he's been able to hit a few threes, some outside shots in his day. You got Michael Ertl, coming back. He's a good mid-range, kind of opened up more so in the latter half of the season. So he'll be kind of counted on. It's a really good point guard as far as, just not turning the ball over as well. Let's see who else you got. Juan Jackson, just his defensive prowess. And then you got, some guys like Tre Jemison, obviously, just to see him progress. Ronji Gordon, who played a little bit more at the end of last year. So, those guys can be counted on. They know the system. But as we've seen with basketball, people want to play fast. Andy Kennedy wants to play fast. He wants to get guys running. Last year was more of a grinding team. They had to do that because they didn't have, the offense that maybe Andy wants. But this year, with a lot of the transfers in, I think they're going to try to figure that out a little bit more, score some more points. And, from that, I think we'll get some of those deep shotters, probably from the transfer guys coming in.
That makes sense. And if you're going to return 4 starters, that continuity, the veteran leadership, and just knowing the system and knowing, anticipation of where you're going to be on the floor on both sides of the floor, it makes a huge difference. Inside Conference USA, Evan, we mentioned Junior Lofton. He had huge success on the U19 team for Team USA this past summer. What are some of the other games, and who are some of the other rivalries and that exist inside CUSA that maybe UAB is going to have to measure themselves against?
North Texas is really a squad that's really done well the past few seasons. They got into the tournament this past year, had a win. So I mean, that's a really great program. They lost a lot of guys, off that team, but that's a good program that has been shaped really well under their head coach. Fortunately for UAB, they took 2 of those games in the regular season last year. So, they kind of have North Texas number the past season. So we'll kind of see how they measure up against them this season. Obviously you got La Tech. That's going to be one of their biggest rivals, especially in the West. The other teams in the West are, coming up a little bit here and there. Rice had some guys kind of transfer out, so they're having to figure out. Obviously, You had UTSA, where their big-time scorers UTEP the past few years. Both those teams had really big-time scorers, so they're going to have to kind of replace some guys coming up. So, just looking on that Western Division, even though you're not really looking at divisions on the basketball side, you're looking at the teams that they're going to play more so than anyone. La Tech and North Texas are really those 2 teams. And, of course, you got Western Kentucky where Rick Stansbury there just churning out guys, getting NBA caliber players like Bootsy the past few years. So, I mean, you're going to look at Western Kentucky out of that kind of eastern side of the conference coming out.
Yeah, they had Hollingsworth as well. He was a real big shot maker in the guard position. But yeah, we all saw what North Texas did last season, and I think you're totally correct with Junior Lofton and La Tech leading charge there. Now let's take a look at the non-conference schedule. What game or 2 is going to pop up on the scroll for the listeners and be surprised that UAB grabbed a win or 2? What game might help define their season and establish and reinforce their culture and their identity for the 2021-2022 season?
Well, they definitely have a couple games that are going to be big time. They got 2 big Power 5 games, through Andy Kennedy's kind of coaching connects, a couple old buddies of his, Frank Martin. They're going to travel to South Carolina kind of mid-November, so it's going to be an early season game for them. So that's a big test for them. But I think, if they get a win there, that'll be a big mark on their resume. That'll be that could be a quad 1 win for them, as well as West Virginia coming to Birmingham. They're going to play it at Legacy Arena, not Bartow, but that's obviously with one of Andy's biggest kind of coaching mentors in Bobby Huggins. So they're going to kind of be reunited there with West Virginia. West Virginia, we've seen what they've been able to do the past as long as Huggy Bear's been there. So that's a big game for them. If they could get one there, especially at home, that's going to kind of set off some radars for this team being a tournament caliber team. And, outside those 2, you also got, New Mexico, they play in a tournament, and as well as, UNC Asheville to open the season. So you got some quality programs, some mid-major programs that have, had success the past few years. So it's a really good schedule for them, especially coming off a year where they had to drop off a few of their, quality opponents from last year. So it's a quality schedule, and, if they can get through it, without any blemishes, it could possibly make CUSA, a multi-bid league team. But, that it goes to these teams taking care of business and their non-conference schedules.
Yeah, you mentioned it right there. If they can get some of those wins, like you mentioned that West Virginia game, maybe that South Carolina game, and a couple of UNC Asheville, of course, then we're talking multiple bids for a league that's slated maybe just to have their conference winner in. And UBA is definitely one of those teams that can do that. Evan, thank you so much. So thankful for a few minutes here. We'll get you out of here on this one. If you were going to look into your crystal ball and you were going to tell and try to figure out how those Blazers might do this season, give the listeners a little feel on what you think the end result might be, or maybe what the ceiling is for UBA this season.
I think the ceiling for them, especially with so many transfers come in, obviously with that, you got to kind of figure out how that all works. We've seen that, in college, NBA, lots of different trades or, transfers come in. It all comes down to the chemistry within the team. But, just looking at it on paper, I think their ceiling is the tournament. And I believe, when it's all said and done, I think Louisiana Tech will take the regular season title, but I think UAB can get it done in the tournament, and that will get their automatic bid for CUSA. And, I think they get in the tournament, and depending on who they get matched up with, they could get a win because, Andy's got experience. He knows how to, play in tournaments. So, I think it just comes to how he gets this roster, how they come together, this early part of the season.
And the one thing that this early part of the season is going to let them do is to spend that time and build that camaraderie between the roster, the newbies. That didn't exist in many programs last year where teams were not practicing together, doing isolated workouts. So the fact that coach gets to get in there and do his good work, like you mentioned, he can do, whether it be with the roster or maybe in a big game in March. That sounds pretty promising, Evan. Evan, thank you so much. Please give Evan a follow on Twitter at Dudley Do Right AL, and follow everything for UAB at aldotcom, and you can just scroll down /UAB and you'll find Dudley's work and you'll be able to follow the Blazers. So Evan, thank you so much. Totally appreciate it, and good luck this season. Hopefully we can catch up later on this season.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, man.
Cheers.